tournaments abound on Nexus. Gladiatorial contest comes to this network. New club forms in Nashville. For the Diplomacy Broadcast Network, I'm David Hood, and this is Deadline, DBN's monthly news program. Dateline, January 2021. For our feature story, many diplomacy hobbyists, myself included, first played the game face-to-face with a group of local friends, providing the 7 players needed for diplomacy on a regular basis. With the right organization and promotion, such a group can grow into a full-fledged diplomacy club. Such clubs not only enhance the fun for their members, they also provide tremendous opportunities to grow our hobby in general. So how do we encourage and support the formation and growth of new clubs in local communities? What will it take for these diplomacy clubs to succeed? We'll talk about these and other issues later in the broadcast with a panel of experienced club and organizers from Chicago, Minnesota, and the DC area. But first, a look at headlines from around the world of diplomacy. First, she dominated the early games last spring in the inaugural season of the Virtual Diplomacy League. Then she won the Boston Massacres virtual tournament in June. Now Tanya Gill has done it again. The VDL held its championship event on January 16, and the Canadian Phenom has once again vanquished her competitors to take home the top prize. Her 11-center Germany just edged out the 10-center France of her alliance partner Dave Roberts from Snohomish, Washington. Also added to the list of Tanya's victims were other VDL finalists Ed Sullivan, Morgante Pell, John Anderson, Karthik Kanath, and Liam Stokes. Season 2 of the VDL starts back up in March. Join this monthly virtual diplomacy action by following the link to the VWDC Discord server, which is found on the NADF website, the nadf.org, and is also available in the description field below this broadcast. Nexus, the place for hobby-wide online diplomacy tournaments played on all the major websites and Android apps. The second season of its Gunboat Trophy has just gotten underway, with exactly 100 players vying to reach the top board and hopefully take the championship. One of those players is the Season 1 champion, known by the name EVR1022 online, who also recently won the Speedboat League Championship. A tournament for the variant Cold War is also open for registration on Nexus. And then there's Season 5 of the Nexus Classic Dip Tournament. It finished recently with Italian Alessandro Tavani, known online as Kutuzov, winning over a field totaling 107 players. Season 6 signups have already begun. So go throw your hat in the ring by joining the Nexus Discord server using the link provided in the description field below this broadcast. The Virtual World Diplomacy Classic was held December 18th through the 20th on the VWDC Discord server. Morgante Pell from Vermont took top honors, besting a top board featuring an impressive roster of both experienced sharks and hot newcomers. These included Nicolas Sahuge, Bill Hackenbracht, Farron Jane, Peter McNamara, Maxime Popov, and Matthew Krill. This extremely successful 6-round event was the largest virtual face-to-face tournament by far and is expected to become an annual tradition. Importantly, the VWC Discord server has itself been transformed since the tournament concluded. It is now called the Virtual World Diplomacy Community, intended not only to host next year's Classic, as well as the virtual versions of DixieCon and Liberty, should those events not be held face-to-face in 2021, but it is now also available to host pickup games of live virtual diplomacy anytime 7 players come together. Join the VWDC server now by using that link provided below this broadcast. Diplomacy has its newest local club, the Nashvilleans of, well, Nashville, otherwise known as the Athens of the South. Their logo features Thucydides, an Athenian and the father of Realpolitik. We all know that diplomacy is Realpolitik in board game form, so it seems appropriate. Kirk Vaughn and the rest of his villains have been playing some virtual games and planning for the launch of regular face-to-face play in Nashville once the pandemic subsides. You can contact Kirk at diplo.order.inbox@gmail.com, or you can find the invite to their Discord space on the connections page of the NADF website, thenadf.org. The 152nd issue of Diplomacy World dropped on January 1, and it is chock full of content about leagues, tournaments, and hobby organizations. Zachary Moore is interviewed by Randy Lawrence Hurt about the just completed first season of Moore's Virtual Diplomacy League, with Zach also announcing some, let's say, interesting special awards. You'll have to read the issue to get more details. There are also articles about designing map variants versus rule variants, the history of hobby organization and hobby services, and a full report on the Tempest tournament held back in October. Download the latest issue of our hobby's flagship publication at diplomacyworld.net. After a break of 7 years, the Tour of Britain returns in 2021 as a virtual face-to-face tournament on Discord and Backstabber, beginning on Saturday, March the 6th and Sunday, March the 7th. The tour will be a league-style event spread over 4 weekends, so March, June, September, and November, with 2 games each weekend, and then culminating in the coronation of the new King or Queen of England on Sunday, the 27th of November. That throne is open to all players, not just those from the British Isles. Games will be played in the early afternoon UK time, making it especially convenient for players not only from the UK, but also continental Europe and North America. To register your interest and for details of the rules and scoring, look on the VWDC Discord server, the World Diplomacy Face-to-Face Facebook page, and in all other discerning diplomacy media. The champion of Season 16 for Chicagoland's Diplomacy Club, the Windy City Weasels, is DBN's own Brandon Fogel, as he won the Weasel Royale weekend before last. His 11-center turkey just barely edged out former champ Ali Adib's 10-center France in an exciting game featuring an on-again, off-again AT alliance and a long, protracted EF war in the West, in which Adib eventually prevailed over the England of Wesley Ketchum. Other Royale participants this year included Carlos Trevino, Jay Hunnelt, Christian Klein, and for a short period of time, Brian Pravel. The last stop of this season's tour of virtual diplomacy tournaments is British Columbia's own Cascadia, to be held Saturday, January 30th, under the capable leadership of Chris Brand. This is a 2-round event with the best combined score taking the victory, using the ManorCon scoring system and featuring unlimited game length. If you want the game to end, then it's win or draw, baby. Round 1 begins at 8 a.m. Pacific time, with round 2 to begin at 4 p.m. Sign up now at the link provided below this broadcast and keep up with the latest Cascadia news on the NADF Discord server. First came the cool idea of having a YouTube channel to house live-streamed coverage of virtual diplomacy games and tournaments. The Diplomacy Broadcast Network was born. Then came the also cool idea, creating an invitational virtual face-to-face tournament in which the top 28 players from each season's virtual face-to-face, regular face-to-face, and online events would meet in gladiatorial fashion to battle for the crown of the DBN Invitational. Now, folks, the time has arrived. With only Cascadia to go for qualifying, the picture has become much clearer for those diplomacy players right on the bubble, hoping against hope to receive that golden ticket to the Willy Wonka factory tour of diplomacy, the DBNI. Joining us now for a special countdown segment of our program is official DBN bubble watcher, Zachary Moore. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, David. It has been another fantastic championship here in the diplomacy world. The VDL top board is complete, and our top 3 in the DBNI standings all took part in the VDL top board, leapfrogging former leader and current has-been Bill Hackenbrack. I'm just going to jump through the first 26. We don't care about them. We can't wait to get to the bubble. We want to talk about the bubble. Starting with number one.
Bubble baby, bubble baby.
The bubble baby. 1, Tanya Gill. 2, John Anderson, Morgante, Bill. Russ Dennis, who cares? That's the top 26. Let's get to the interesting part. Number 27 through 28, the bubble, the interior bubble, the inside of the bubble. Conrad Woodring is sitting at 26th, looking mighty vulnerable. Marcus Zylstra sitting at 28th, just waiting to get knocked off his throne, and 29th, pining for a chance to get in. And I believe he has stated that he'll be at Cascadia. Estacio Rauli. 30th, Napoleon of Oz. He is an online player. We don't expect to see him again. But here's what surprised me, David. I'm going to skip 31 through 38. Good for them. They're going to need to put up a good performance at Cascadia to get in. But look at 39 and 40. It's Dave Roberts and Liam Stokes. Both made it to the VDL top board. Liam actually has played on 2 top boards as of this taping and still all the way down at 40th. That was the big shock to me. I expected them to show up higher on this list just from having made it to the VDL championship game.
Did they blow it? Did they blow their shot at the VDL top board? And I don't know. And particularly Dave was so close to Tanya in that game. And look, he really needed to edge Tanya out, looks to me like.
I think they did blow it, David. And the thing about bubbles are, there are really 2 ways to approach a bubble. You can play with the bubbles. You can get your hands all over the bubbles, or you can blow the bubbles. And I'm looking at Dave Roberts and Liam Stokes as 2 guys who really blew it when it comes to bubbles, with maybe some childish play, we might even say.
Well, you would know, being the bubble boy of diplomacy that you apparently are, you are the expert in bubbleology. So what other bubblicious insights do you have for us today?
Bubblicious insights. There are infinite bubblicious insights. Just look at my guy, Jason Mastbaum, sticking out at number 38. I've called him out on 2 consecutive DBNI countdown show. And at this point, Jason Mastbaum is really playing for pride, but not his own pride. He's playing for my pride. I need him to jump up into the top 28 to make me look good. If he doesn't, he's going to make Brian Pravel look good as my competitor, and that's not good for me.
Do you know why you need him to do that? Because you couldn't do that for yourself. I see you sitting at number 46.
46. Listen, there were a couple of issues with my play. I don't know how it happened. I feel like it was just last year that I was standing on top of the diplomacy world, beating my chest. Maybe that was a dream, but I have not played my best. I haven't been near a bubble.
You were beating your chest, but were you beating any of your opponents? I'm not sure. You're number 46. But it was a good try, Zach. Maybe next year you will be close enough to the bubble for us to make bubblicious comments about your bubble potential.
I mean, if you thought 2020 was bad, 2021 is going to start out with a major tournament that I'm not a part of. I couldn't think of a worse start to the year for just fans of diplomacy and good people in general.
So wait, you're not playing Cascadia?
I was referring to DBNI, but breaking news, I do apologize to Chris Brand. I will not be playing Cascadia.
Wow. All right, for those watching this episode of Deadline at Home, which is everyone watching this, I hope, do not do what Zach did and skip Cascadia. Go play Cascadia, because that is your chance to get off the bubble, to get near the bubble, to be a bubblicious bubbler. The only shot you got is to go play Cascadia on January 30th. Well, we are now into a new calendar year, which means we're in a new year for diplomacy. So I thought this would be a good time to hear about the perspective on the state of the hobby from our own North American Diplomacy Federation president, Siobhan Nolen. Siobhan, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
So tell me what you think. We're in a new year. We've had an interesting 2020. We're going to have a very different, I hope, 2021. Well, how do you see the state of the hobby as we enter this new year?
I mean, 2020 has been such a turbulent and interesting year for diplomacy. Starting very early last year, everything locked down and all the tournaments were canceled. And I remember when we first went virtual for the first tournament, your tournament, David, DixieCon, nobody really knew how it was going to go. And what happened was a really amazing and surprising groundswell of support, both from the longstanding face-to-face hobby, as well as the efforts to recruit the online community. And so there's really been a merge and a melding of those two communities that we've never seen before. And I'm really excited for the swell of new players and the way everyone's interacting and just how famously that's gone on.
Yeah, I agree. It's been really quite a cool experience, but that doesn't mean there haven't been challenges in the, not only in putting on the virtual events, but in trying to integrate players who are coming from very different backgrounds. What challenges do you see that we face as we move into this new year?
I mean, this new year, we've really got the swing of the virtual tournaments down, and that's been fantastic. But as, vaccine rollouts start happening, as we start getting back to a place where we might be able to start to travel and see each other in groups again, one of the big challenges we're going to face is that the face-to-face community and the online community have some fundamental differences in how they approach this game. I think immediately of the face-to-face community does not use an adjudication engine at its tournaments. We push the pieces on a board, and if mistakes happen, they happen. And, as well as I do that TDs get called over all the time to adjudicate those disputes. But online players are very used to an engine like WebDip or Backstabber adjudicating for them. So I see that as a potential point of contention between the two communities.
Well, I'm not something we can't work out, but I agree. That's just one example, I think, of a number of things that we'll have to deal with. But I'm looking forward to the opportunity to deal with them.
Oh, absolutely. I haven't traveled for diplomacy in just about a year now, and it's the first time in probably over a decade that I haven't taken several plane flights to diplomacy tournaments and seen my friends and gotten the chance to yell at them over a board of diplomacy.
Well, it's really true. Well, tell us what's been going on with the North American Diplomacy Federation during the past several months, just as an organization.
So much. It's the efforts to get everyone both from the face-to-face and the online community onto Discord has been huge for player recruitment and tournament management. There's a new website, which if you're not aware, you should go to it. It will have many, many resources for local hobbies that you can join, as well as tournament information and everything else you could possibly find. And these have been things that the hobby have talked about for a long time. And suddenly we're all at home and we have time to do these things and they're getting done.
Yeah, that's really true. The NADF.org is the website. And somewhere in our description field for this broadcast, we'll have the Discord link to the NADF Discord server. So how has that transition to Discord gone? And are there any projects in the works for NADF?
The transition to Discord has been largely very accepted by the community, especially the younger members of our community who are already on other Discord services or servers for things that they do, whether it's other games or communities that they're parts of. It's been a little more difficult for people like me. Discord for me was a little unwieldy at first, and I think some of the face-to-face players did resist it a bit, but that's where the community is now, and everyone's there.
At least until we can see each other face-to-face again.
That's exactly true.
So what plans do you have for the organization into 2021 that we haven't already talked about, if any?
Really fleshing out the website, especially as pertains to the local clubs, getting links up to whether it's Facebook groups, meetup pages, making sure that people can find clubs in their areas or start clubs of their own. If you're in an area of the United States where there isn't an active diplomacy club, I really encourage you to get started in just getting a few house games going, seeing if there are other players in your area who are interested in meeting up. You'd be surprised how easy just a simple meetup page and a couple of house games will get you players that you had no idea were in your area.
Siobhan, you didn't know this, but immediately after our interview, our viewers are going to watch a panel discussion about the promotion and organization of diplomacy clubs. So you are giving me a great segue into the next segment.
I really did not know that, viewers. I promise that was not planned.
Well, tell us your final thoughts then for this interview to our viewership about how diplomacy is progressing and thriving during this very strange time and your hopes for the future.
One of the things I've been most impressed by this year, and this goes with what my tip was just now, is just how many people in this hobby have stepped up to take on organizer roles. I think of the Virtual Diplomacy League, as well as all the virtual tournaments and the DBN Invitational, DBN itself. Just the amount of personal time and effort that so many people are willing to put into enriching this hobby and continuing to help it grow has just been fantastic to watch.
Yes, I agree. Siobhan, thank you so much for being on the program, and I look forward to talking to you again as our wonderful 2021 progresses.
Fantastic. Thank you, David.
Let's get to our panel discussion about club organization and promotion. Local diplomacy clubs have long been an essential building block for the hobby as a whole. By fostering the fun and camaraderie of regular face-to-face contact, dip clubs can help not only to attract players to the game, but to keep them in the hobby. There's an old-time hobby saying in diplomacy that the game brings us to the hobby, but relationships keep us here. So can we use lessons learned from successful clubs in order to encourage the formation and growth of new clubs? Let's find out by consulting our panel of experienced organizers. Kevin O'Kelly from Chicago's Windy City Weasels, Graham Woodring of the Potomac Tea and Knife Society, and Zachary Moore from the Minnesota Diplomacy Club. So Kevin, let's start with you. Give us a brief history of the Chicago Club and tell us how club play generally works in Weasel World.
Weasel World it is. Thanks, David, and thanks for having me. The Windy City Weasels were born out of a creation from the infamous Jim O'Kelly, no relation. He is a longer time player, played in Postal, and played on the tournament circuit, meeting some people. And kind of when the Yahoo groups were picking up, did a mass mailing to his Postal players, to the Yahoo groups to see if he can get a game. And we had our first game in September of 2005. First year, we had 9 boards, a couple dual board sessions, ending in the Weasel Pile. We'll go into some of the fun nicknames that we've created here. But for the last 15 years, we've held considerable amount of matches. 84 players is the maximum we've had in one season. I think we were near 40 games in that season. Once we started growing, Jim couldn't handle it on his own. And so he came up with our governing board, which is called the Sneak. And that is a pack of weasels. And why is that? Because weasels sneak around and do dastardly things, which is what diplomacy players do. So it is a perfect fit. As the Sneak was built and games were thought up, we were wondering, how do we grow? And so we used Meetup. We have probably our biggest growth throughout the years has been Meetup. The Yahoo groups kind of fell apart. The online web dip and Nexus and things that we're using today weren't around yet. And so some of our best players are just randoms we found on the street and turned out to be, world-class players who competed in Grand Prix tournaments. And that's been the backbone.
Thank you, Kevin. Graham, how about the PTKS? Tell us a little bit about the club that you're involved in and your tournament, the Tempest and the Teapot.
Well, hopefully the Potomac Tea and Knife Society needs no introduction. It's been around for years and years, much longer than I've been playing diplomacy, maybe even longer than I've been alive. I'm not really sure. But I just happen to be the current yoke bearer, I suppose, or torch bearer. In the before times, before COVID, we had a strong local hobby. We would have, games at least once a month, just keep, local interest going, and also try to recruit through some internet players and some mail players. Like play by mail, not men. Sorry. And so Tempest and Teapot has been a very successful tournament over the years. In 2018, we hosted the World Championship, which was over 10 boards per round. I think it had 11 or 12 boards, maybe even 13 boards in one round. So last year, so not last year because that was 2020, 2019, we had a bit of a world championship hangover. So it was a much smaller tournament, but we're hoping that maybe this year, come this fall, we'll be able to come back strong. But yeah, it remains to be seen.
Well, I certainly hope so. Zach, let's move up north and talk to you about the Minnesota Diplomacy Club. Tell us a little bit about how you formed and about how you do things.
Well, David, we owe a lot of our existence to the Windy City Weasels. It would have been 5 or 6 years ago now that I traveled to my first ever COD-Con tournament, a tournament that they hosted for many years at the College of DuPage in suburbs of Chicago, with my good friend Ben Johnson from Minneapolis, who introduced me to the game. And it was a great experience. The Weasels, put us up with free lodging, showed us a great weekend. We'd went out and played games with them before and between rounds. And so me and the guy, Ben Johnson, who I'd traveled with, kind of looked at each other during the weekend and said, we would love to have this in the Twin Cities. And it took us a couple years before we were kind of both in the right spot with the right free time to start the club. But 2 years ago, almost 3 now, in 2018, Ben said, I want to do this. And he texted everybody in his phone. I don't even know if everybody he texted remembered who he was, but he texted everybody and invited them to a game. And we scratched together 7 players for that first game. Got a lot of guidance from the Weasels on how to grow from there. The Midwest is a tight-knit little network, and we owe a lot to the Weasels for our founding.
That is enough currying favor with Kevin O'Kelly. He's not going to respond in kind, I guarantee you.
We have a lot of expats, even Graham, and I know all of you have been to our tournaments, so the camaraderie is fantastic.
Sure. Well, speaking of camaraderie, Graham, I think the PTKS in particular is known for having really long and deep relationships between the members. It's, as you said, it's been going on a very long time before you were playing diplomacy, which has also been a long time. How do you think the PTKS has established and grown that sense of community between the players?
Well, frankly, that's a bit tough to answer. I think it's largely been a very organic process. And I think the simplest answer is that we just like each other as people. There's a very solid core group of people that are kind of like the social nucleus of the group. And then the gravity of those people, the people that come to mind are, Andy Bartoloni, Tim Richardson, Chris Martin, Peter Jurgen, Joe and Lori Wheeler. So I think, this was a very solid group, and they all liked each other, and they all were very good friends, and they had this sort of gravity that kind of pulled other people in that wanted to, share in the good times.
Well, and I think we ought to just say, as a matter of hobby history, which is kind of my job, that Andy Marshall, who is no longer really all that active in diplomacy, was so instrumental in establishing PTKS's sort of esprit de corps, I would say. He gave everybody nicknames and just really did a good job of connecting everyone and keeping everyone wanting to be connected with each other. Zach, Minnesota being a more recently established club, it's really, even from the very beginning, I think you've already mentioned this, used technology to help form and grow and develop your club. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have just tried to put the name out everywhere that we could, and the internet has provided us a ton of great opportunities. We never lived in the dark ages of what did you call them? Yahoo groups? I don't know what either of those words mean. We spent 4, 5, 6 months just scraping together 7 players month after month to try to get a game, and then finally we said, all right, we got to increase our online presence, put down the money for a meetup club, and the next event we were pushing 2 boards. We almost had 2 boards at that event. And that was the moment that we all knew that this thing was going to last. And so that's been the rock, and we've pushed out everywhere we could. We've found people on Twitter. I used to go and just go onto the Minnesota Diplomacy Club Twitter account and type in to the search feature diplomacy game and scroll past 1,000 tweets about foreign policy till I find someone talking about the actual game and respond to them, and just throw these little darts trying to reel people in. And we did get a couple of contacts via Twitter, so it could be a really valuable outlet for organizing, for recruiting, and for building that camaraderie, because you interact with your members on Twitter. We joke around with our members on Twitter. We rib them. We post our little game journals, talk a little smack. It's a great way to build that camaraderie outside the games.
Kevin, let me go back to you about the Weasels. You know, I think one thing the Weasels particularly are known for is a set of traditions that, and really frankly, a set of terminology that's used to describe the season as it goes. Certain players, certain organizers, certain events. So, talk to us a little bit about Weasel speak, if you would.
Weasel speak. There was a name for everything. My first game with the Weasels was at the original Weasel Pile. I'm not sure where that name comes from. I tried to search a lot of them beforehand, but Jim just came up with a lot. But we had a Weasel Pile. It was the end of the year celebration. We were lucky to have a gentleman who's no longer active with the club, Eric Brown, host us for an end of the season gala, we would call it. We had multiple boards, lots of food and beverages, and we would get there early and stay late. It was a heck of a drive from the city, but it was the celebration. We would congratulate the Weasel of the year. We would have the Bull Weasel. We've got the tournaments as CodCon and the Weasel Moot, which is our flagship tournament. But the Weasel Moot, the winner of that every year is called the Alpha Weasel. We've got terminology because, like you mentioned, with recruiting, you come for the game, and most people like it. The meetup has been fantastic for us, but it's not just been diplomacy players like, who have found it online or played it in college and just reconnecting. We found some board gamers who were like, all right, I'll try this game, and have stuck around. Not all of them do. I mean, it's not everyone's, favorite game, but, the ones that we stick and have a loyal following for a couple of years at a time, or 15 years in the case of myself and the Scorpion, the Dixie Con winner, Christian Klein. But it's the camaraderie and the competitiveness. At the end of the year, we have a top 7. We have a top board of our local club, and the same way it's celebrated. You want to be in that top 7. There's bragging rights. People are fighting. Our Prime Weasel, which is the chairman of the board, he scored 60 out of 100 points in our last game of the season to move his way up into number 7, and he was thrilled. Like, that's all we talked about for a week. Competitiveness drives in Chicago, and we've had a lot of fun with it along the way.
Certainly sounds like it. Graham, moving back to the PTKS, one of the things I've always appreciated about your group is how you organize and go together to tournaments, not just the Tempest tournament that you run, but there's usually a caravan of players that come to DixieCon or go to Liberty Cup or one of the other tournaments that's within the driving distance of the DC area. Maybe even caravan to Chicago, I'm not sure. How important do you think that sort of traveling together is, and how have you been able to accomplish that, just logistically?
Well, I think it's one of the most important things as far as the tournament, circuit. Certainly when I was coming up as a young player, every tournament I would go to, there would always be that PTKS cadre, and that leads to name recognition. And then they say, one of the tournaments to say, oh, we're having our own tournament. Why don't you come check it out? And like, we're at every other tournament. So from an advertising and recruitment perspective, it's absolutely paramount. And how is it accomplished? Well, frankly, I think Andy Bartoloni deserves all of the credit for that, because that man will travel absolutely anywhere, at least back in the day. I think one year he went to 13 tournaments.
Holy cow.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And Tom Haver also did 13 tournaments that year, and I went to 10 tournaments that year. As far as the organizing, I think that goes back to what I said before. It's, we all just like each other. We like hanging out. And like, hey, we're going to go up go up to Boston or go up to Vermont for a long weekend and just hang out and, you know, play board games and go in the hot tub and just have a good time. I was like, yeah, let's do it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, pit kissers really are a lot of pit kissers are each other's best friends. I think in a way that is really kind of impressive from the outside looking in. So, Kevin, let's go back to the Windy City Weasels for a minute. Graham just mentioned organization, and I think aspiring clubs might want to know how are these things organized? Who's running them? How is the organization, replenished or made fresh every year? Tell us a little bit about how that works with the Weasels.
Absolutely, and it's a great follow up on there is. The leadership team, again, it's called the Sneak. At first, we had 5 members. We didn't start a formal organization until I think it was year 3. But again, Jim O'Kelly he ran the club for 13 or 14 of the first 15 years, but you get burnt out. You got family lives, you got work, you've got all these things. And so spreading the wealth around is terribly important. You must have dedicated roles for everyone who's participating. You need people to, whip up games, going on Twitter and finding people or checking up the meetup and not even just, oh, hey, someone, we've got 7 signed up. No, it's emailing those 7 and making sure on the Monday before your Saturday game that they're going to be there, and then making sure on the Friday before your Saturday game that something didn't come up. We play a game, and it's great that so many people are dedicated and enjoy the hobby and enjoy the friendship, but sometimes real life gets in the way. And so you need 1 or 2 people to dedicate that. You need someone to do the tech, do the meetup, do the website. The website is I wouldn't say as important or top priority, but having that web presence out there. So if someone goes to Google and types Windy City Weasels, they're going to get our webpage. They're going to get a link to our meetup. They're going to get a history. They're going to get write-ups of our games. So you need active players. Not everyone needs to be on the governing board. You just need some active players who are willing to write up a 1-paragraph summary about a great stab in a game or how disappointing it was to finish at 17 instead of getting to the magical 18. You'll have all that, and then of course it takes not fundraising, but it takes dues, and it takes a tight steward on the money. You need to be able to have dedicated people who are willing to go out of their way, sacrifice some time to do it. And like you said, you do it every year. So we just had our elections at the last Weasel Pile, and the 4 positions that were up, all 4 were reelected because we're passionate about it and we want to do it. But last year, 2 of the 3 were new. So you always are getting new blood, and it's a great way to bring younger people in because, I'll play in a game or, I don't really care about it. But if you're tasked with leadership, you become a little more involved. And then you say, okay, what is my goal this year? Jim O'Kelly, and kind of going back to what Graham said, Jim O'Kelly, all of our goals were to keep up with the Pit Kissers. Every year we wanted to have more games. We wanted to travel more. We wanted to be more tournament diplomacy. Our group, Jim was the only tournament player when we first started, and Jim was like, we're going to go. So my first travel tournament was to DixieCon in 2008. And after that, it was like, I'm going every year. I would negotiate with my wife, who was more difficult to ally with than any player I've played with on the board. And I said, all right, this year it's this weekend. I got to go to DipCon. It's in California, or it's in Seattle, or it's where you're going to go. And so a lot of that organization is getting so many people involved. It's not just, us 3 who are sitting here running our groups. It's a team of 7 or more to get it done.
Zach, I think, thanks, Kevin. Zach, I think you are working on a new project to help clubs organize and promote themselves. You would care to elaborate to our audience about that?
Yeah, David. So I think a lot of what we have talked about today is we've talked about the need for kind of a meetup type of marketing presence, the need for getting buy-in from your members, like Kevin just talked about, with finding a role for everybody, something small anybody can do. We've talked about creative ways to use technology to create opportunities that didn't exist 10 years ago, or in some cases even 5 years ago for the hobby. And so I've been kind of thinking up ways with a couple other organizers. Bill Hackenbrack has been someone who I've been talking to a lot about this, of how can we make it easier for someone who is in a city without a diplomacy club to start a diplomacy club, as we get back to the type of life where you can meet in person and play diplomacy. What are some ways we can support them? And some of the things we thought of are, well, running a meetup is really a necessity, really the core recruitment tool for your club, but it costs money, and so it can be a burden for the organizer, especially since the type of people who might have the most time to organize might be a college student or a young adult not married who isn't generating a ton of discretionary income. Another thing is finding connections, finding those first 6 or 7 boards. Your first board is the toughest board to get, I think. And after that, you're just building. So how can we give someone the tools to find that first board? And one of the things that we've put together is what we're kind of trying to call the Club Growth Initiative, where we are raising money that we will distribute to people who want to start a club in their city, to help you pay for marketing, to pay for the meetup, just to kind of reimburse some of those costs to help you get off the ground. Creating a list of contacts with people from all these various diplomacy sites who are willing to give their name and some form of contact info, whether it's an email, and just creating a master list that we can then give some names. If you're in Indianapolis and you say, I want to start a club in Indianapolis, we could say, well, we've got 1,000 names. Here's 4 people from Indianapolis that have expressed interest in joining a club. You're 5/7 of the way to your first board. And then also just dealing with the things that nobody can predict that comes up. All these minor things with running a club. How do you write a code of conduct? How do you collect dues? How do you deal with this interpersonal conflict that came up in the 7th game of our year? We kind of want to be a supporting cast where you can go on Discord and say, hey, Bill, hey, Zach, you guys have been running clubs. Hey, Kevin O'Kelly, this situation came up. What do you guys suggest? We want to support people who want to start a club in their city, and we want to get people excited about starting a club in their city. So if you're sitting in an area without a diplomacy club and thinking, hey, maybe I would like to have this. I think maybe I have time to try and cook something up, but I'm not sure where to start. We're going to publish a little document with our contact info and how we can get the ball rolling to help you start a club.
That's pretty exciting, Zach. It's great to hear. Kevin, how about some final thoughts for our audience?
I'm thrilled that a lot of them have been said by Graham and by Zach already. You come for the friendship, you build based on the passion of the game, but don't let anything hold you back. If you have to be creative and maybe play a different game to start out with, just draw and grow your membership, grow the base so you can get that 7. You can't play without 7. Well, you play with 6, but it's not as fun. Get that 7, and there's a lot of people around the hobby who are willing to help you with the formal stuff, but it's a fun game. Don't let the hurdles get in the way. We'll help you out whenever we can, but our club again, I'm thrilled that I just got a random email, and when I went to my first game, my then girlfriend, now wife, said, if I don't hear from you in about how many hours, because I just drove to some random person's house, don't let anything hold you back. Keep in touch, try some new things, and the friendships I made more than 15 years ago today are as strong as ever, even though I've been stabbed in the back 100 times. So,
well, at some point it might be about you and not about the people that did the stabbing. Just saying, just throwing that out there. Graham, let's give the last word to the pit kisser. Tell us anything or you think our audience needs to know. There's somebody out there thinking, I bet I could do a club. Give them some ideas.
Well, to be quite honest, I think we've covered everything important to say has already been said, but to reiterate some of the important points, just having a good time is the most important thing. And, we all know that a diplomacy game can get a little heated, and sometimes it can be not so much fun, and that does suck. But ultimately, you just gotta tell yourself it's just a game, and if you have to play some other games, play some other games. And I credit DixieCon with having a really great tournament every year, and half the fun is the other games, right? As so many more people come not to play diplomacy, just to play other games. And then, maybe some people get sucked in or, fill on a board or something. But it's the camaraderie. It's the people that you only get to see a couple times a year. And that's a really special thing. And like Kevin said, the friendships that I made 20 years ago, thanks to this great, crazy game, is such an important part of my life even today.
That's a great word, Graham. Thanks to everyone being involved in this, and you out there that are listening to this, it's time for you to start a diplomacy club. And thanks to all of you watching at home. We hope you have enjoyed this broadcast of Deadline. If you have news, ideas for features, or feedback of any kind, please feel free to send an email to info@diplobn.com, or you can drop me a line directly using davidhood@dixiecon.com. For our other broadcast offerings, visit our website at diplobn.com. This is David Hood signing off. I wish you brightness and bliss and, of course, Belgium.